I want to start here. I always try to find like the place to start that naturally presents itself. And because V13 Media Group, Life Media Group, because V13 is the French word for life, and without music, life would be a mistake. Um, we work with mostly young, aspiring, up and coming artists or artists that need like a big refresh. And we're big believers in foundation. uh, not the rocket ship and the launch, but the actual launch pad and the earth below the launch pad and tilling the soil and whatnot. So when they talk to me about success and generating revenue and like continue the project going, I personally so far have been referring to the 3 Ps, which for me is product. So physical copies of your stuff that people can buy, performance, and placement. And, obviously you're a huge part of that last one with Sync. But I wanted to start there. Like you've been doing this longer than I have. You've got so many successes to your career so far. What do you think of this idea of 3 Ps? Am I missing something, or does product placement and performance make sense for generating revenue for artists?
I think that's an excellent framework for that. I guess I would think about when you said that you work on the foundation, as opposed to the actual launch. I love that whole idea, And if we go one layer below that, I think that it's important for people to remember is that we are just a star in a constellation, and we're basically a part of everything around us, and I just literally was shooting a blog on that recently. And we essentially have no control over a lot of what happens to us, like who's keeping the lights on. We can't control that person. Somebody built this computer that we're talking on. Somebody built your house. Like there's all kinds of things that are just exist because we're all these stars in this organized pattern that all contribute to each other. So the sum of all those things, or a part of that sum, is you. It's what you are. And so when you're thinking about it in terms of a musician, or you're thinking about somebody trying to succeed, it's not just about them, And I would argue that your framework is fantastic, but the point is that you can't just only have this singular view, or in this case, a trifecta of things that are going to, propel you forward. It's the people around you. It's literally even the people who love you. It's like people who let you spend the money, if you're in a relationship, on this thing called music. It's like people that just, listen to your songs because you really want them to. It goes out to somebody that you kind of sort of barely know, or whatever. There are people that are going to listen to this right now and hear me that would never have heard me before because of you and because of what you have around you. But it's not just about you. It's about all the things that surround you. So all of that is, I feel like musicians who really want to have success should focus on like a little exercise is take a piece of paper and a pen, put a dot in the middle, and that's you. And then start drawing the little stars around you. Those are the people closest to you, or things, or techniques, or technology, or instruments, or whatever that thing is that are close to you that you can control, but that is a part. And you keep moving out and keep naming those things, and then look at that and ask yourself if that pattern or that shape is that streamlined? Is that going to take you where you want to go? Are there holes in that pattern that you're like, man, I've been putting all my effort into music production and making my stuff sound so good. I realize I haven't played live like in 6 months or whatever. Maybe my chops aren't up to where they should be. All of these things that surround you are so important, and I think it's getting those things right. That there's a poster I saw in high school in like the counselor's office or whatever. Not that I was there all the time needing counseling, but I was in there one time. And it said something to the effect of, it's not the mountains that you have to cross that are going to stop you. It's the pebble in your shoe, And that always stuck with me. And I think that's apt. It applies because You think about all the things that surround you and all the little inefficiencies. And those are the things that are going to slow you down, you know? And so that I believe is the first foundation I think somebody should look at, and then get into your awesome structure, you know, you're like the
Yeah.
launch base or whatever, which is really cool.
That's really awesome. You took it to this deeper level, which I would love to expand on. But first, like that whole idea of the pebble in the shoe, what a cool idea that I can now take away with me. I liken it to when I saw a professor with the jar and they said, "How much room is this?" And they put in the big
Oh, yeah.
rocks and then the small rocks and then the sand. Is it full yet? Is it full yet? And then eventually it is full because there's so much more room in it. I never even thought of the inverse, which is it's not the mountain that's gonna kill you or stop you, it's this tiny little cut on your toe or the pebble that'll heed the progress. So, people, you're absolutely right, factors into that equation, and for me, like, I love people, it's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to connect our music and our art with people, right? We're trying to find the people that it resonates with. Does the people P become a fourth P, or is that like the P before the three Ps? Because really, the question that artists always ask is, I need to make money, which is why I came up with this idea of those three Ps. But you're absolutely right that unless you have the people, those three Ps are going to fall flat.
Yeah. Yeah. I would add a fourth one. And I think people is perfect that you thought up four Ps. And in my, uh, world, in the sync world, it's all about relationships, at least success, because
Mhm.
otherwise you're playing a lottery. You're sitting in a music library somewhere, or you're on a giant label, roster or whatever of an agent. And you're just essentially crossing your fingers, hoping that you're in a lifeboat on the ocean, hoping that it's going to happen for you, and you need to be in control. You need to have your ducks in a row, and you need to have all those three Ps going, but you have to have the right people hear your music for those things to happen. Now you can take the long road and you can build your fan base slowly and you can go online and promote. You're still converting people. It's just that each one is a grain of sand in your jar as opposed to one big rock. If you get the right music supervisor to
Yeah.
hear it and you end up in a blockbuster movie, like we had last year, we had two artists get 5 songs into a Nora, biggest film of the year. I mean, it changed their lives, and that was like one person, one supervisor.
Yeah. But I think that you've kind of given me this amazing thing that I got to take away now. Not necessarily change what we're doing because the P's still apply, but before an artist starts to focus in on the revenue and how am I going to generate the money back on what I put into the campaign, it's who's your audience? Who are you going to be pushing this to? You can't perform and get placement and have product to sell to people if you don't know to whom you're selling. So I think that that is a huge important step before even getting to those three P. It's the P before the P's.
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. And I would also say that this is just, of course, my opinion, and people can, rail against it. But I think
Mhm.
artists, especially nowadays, I was in a band for years and stuff too. So I've been there and done that. I think you should walk into it not thinking about the money. You've got to view it as an art. You're an artist and don't expect to make a living at it. I'm not saying that you won't or that you shouldn't aspire to it. And I exist because I
Yeah.
want you to make a living at it. But I think mentally, you're talking about sort of state of mind, and about how do you handle the world, in music. It's like, don't walk into it thinking like, I got to achieve these certain things. And if I don't, I'm a failure. It's just, maybe you just have that job that's going to pay your rent and stuff, and then work on your music. It's your passion. And if you do it well and you're authentic and you do it, you bring the best of yourself through your music, the money comes. It just comes. It's the greatest successes in the world didn't start out thinking about money first. They thought about a dream. They thought about an idea. They thought about
Mhm.
achieving something. And then if it's good and you're passionate about it and you hit the right mark while you're doing it, the money just comes with it, you know?
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right there. I've talked to, close to 100 guests now for this particular podcast series. And the number one word that always comes up is authentic. There's no one word that comes up more than that on every single call. And I'd say at least a quarter of the guests from different parts of the industry, artists, and then people from the business end, like Jake Gold, manager of the Tragically Hip, fantastic career so far. There's a producer in the U.S. whose name I can't recall off the top of my head, but he's worked with Pennywise and Lemmy and all kinds of huge, huge names. Are you a lifer? Why are you doing this? Are you doing this for money? Are you doing this for fame? Wrong. Like, you have to be doing this for creation's sake, for art's sake, and that's where it starts. And if you do all the things on top of that, then you set yourself up for the highest chances of success, not guaranteed success. But like, you said this in one of your videos that I watched this morning, where it's not one thing, it's these multiple things that line up. And that is what, you are looking for with the sync. It's like all the different elements confer or converge to create this incredible moment and like the best song. And that's what you're looking for, so to speak. But that's how the process unfolds.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a sum. I think I was talking about this. It's the sum of the parts. It's about bringing yourself forward. Was that the one, the
Yeah.
mating dance? It's like, I was
Yeah.
thinking about what makes the greatest songs in the world. What makes the classics, the ones that just survive. We can all talk about lyrics. We can talk about the music. We can talk about the delivery, the production. We can break it down analytically, categorize things all we want. But in the end, it's this kind of sum of the parts, and
Mhm.
I equate that almost to like a mating dance. You're bringing the best of you. You're like the animal that's doing the mating dance, trying to um, it's the one shot. And that's sort of the frame of mind, I think, that's really healthy to be in when you're making your music, and just bring the best of you, which is authenticity, but it's a little bit different.
Yeah. I was just pulling up the notes, which is why I might have looked distracted, but it was Cameron Webb. That was the producer in the US who, he very succinctly put it on our chat. He said, I just asked people, are you a lifer? I said, how do you like pick and choose with all these incredible artists and the labels and the money? Like, how do you pick and choose what you're going to work on? He said, the first thing I ask all of them is, are you a lifer? And if they answer that properly, then I'll take on that project, because those are the people that I know will commit to what, like, my feedback and my like no-nos and all the stuff that I'm doing in the studio to bring the best out of them.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, what does SD stand for?
Oh,
Because in my house, it's shit disturber.
I had one of my members joke around, Chris Sync Dynamite. I was like, awesome. I like that. No, it's it stands for so my last name is a real mouthful. It's Shreenan Dyke. And it's got a hyphen in there and everything. And it was early on, and I thought, I'm going to be an online, company. I'm going to be doing this online. People need to remember who I am, So I just shortened it, just Chris SD, make it easy, for people to remember. That's basically all it was.
Makes sense. I mean, same thing on my end. People just know me as Gonda, and it just seems to be the thing that sticks. And
Yeah,
I don't
there
know,
you go.
something about Chris. There's so many Chris's, right?
I
You need
know.
something else.
We're everywhere. Yeah. Yeah.
So you grew up in Ontario, and I know a bit of your story about like how you got into music and whatnot, but why don't you tell me a bit in your words? Like, what was Toronto life like? What was family life like before you discovered the guitar, before you were playing Jimmy, before you're like, the record collection? Uh, tell me a bit about how this journey started.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, an abnormal childhood or anything, and I mean that in the purest sense of the word. It was very quite normal, middle class family. I think when I left home, upper middle class family,
Hmm.
just normal, really normal Canadian upbringing. I actually bounced around a lot as a kid, so I didn't grow up in Ontario. I did spend time in Ontario, so it was like Halifax, and then around Parry Sound for like my sort of formative years, Parry Sound, and then Calgary, and then Quebec for 5 years, learned how to speak French, went to French school, and then Toronto, and then Edmonton, and then Ottawa, and then back to Toronto. And I was in Toronto for a number of years producing records and stuff like that. And then Los Angeles, and then split time between there and Tennessee now. So that's
Wow.
kind of the nutshell. So early on, I mean, I guess the only things that were a bit different was, I had to make friends, right? Because I'd move and I'd leave friends, and I don't have a friend that I've had since childhood. It just
Mhm.
didn't really happen because your life just it's like a hopping in a teleporter, right? And you just all of a sudden you're somewhere else, and you're just there. I remember when I moved to Quebec, it was kind of a rough time for English kids. It was during the separation thing that was going on with René Lévesque and everything. And the kids at school were, probably, rubbing off on their parents. So I had to get into some fights and stuff like that at school because
Yeah.
until I could learn to speak French. So there was that. And, yeah. But the rest is pretty, pretty normal stuff. Nothing to, go on about.
I have a similar experience in the sense that I spent a lot of time traveling after 14. So 14, I moved to Prague from Toronto, and then I was there for 4 years before going to the US. And it does change things. Like I don't have any friends from high school or grade school either.
Hmm.
Ironically, the one friend that I have from high school that I'm in touch with regularly happened to be in the music industry. He's working for a management company in New York called Indigo. And what are the odds that, music just kept following me? I also have music with my family. There's so many parallels with your story to mine that I'm like, oh, that's crazy. Like Tchaikovsky, Cat Stevens, Bob Dylan, the Beatles. That's kind of like how I grew up in this home of like classical music,
Yeah.
jazz, and classic rock. That was
Yeah.
until I discovered hip hop and punk and metal and whatnot.
Yeah.
Same
Yeah,
with
I
you?
mean, yeah, no, it's you nailed it. I mean, we had, there was Anne Marie, of course, in there too. Gordy Lightfoot, right? In with the Beatles and all the Tchaikovsky and everything. We had a Beethoven record. We had a Montoya record. He was a Spanish flamenco guitar player, and sort of I got into that for a while. And I used to come home in high school before my parents got home, and we had an old Pioneer stereo, and I used to, this is before I had headphones or anything, and I used to kind of lie down in between the speakers and put them, facing my ears and crank Zeppelin. And of course, my ears were in front of the woofers, like the tweeters were way up there. So I'm hearing like all this bass and stuff, but that was my Shangri-La, used to come home from school and just rock out to way too loud to Zeppelin with these two big Pioneer speakers on either side of my head lying on the carpet, and stuff. But yeah, I mean the same type of music, and a lot of it was on turntables, right? A turntable forever and
Yeah.
stuff. It was great.
Similar in the sense that we would always have music on during meals, whether it was breakfast or dinner. My parents had that big hi-fi system with you with the wooden, like you with the wooden speakers, and there was constantly be records or CDs on. And then I got to a point in my, I guess, 9, 10 year old self, early teen self, that cassettes were transitioning to CDs and the golden age of hip hop and like pre grunge was happening. And that's kind of when I started to discover. And I mean, you're
Yeah.
getting like Bob Marley, but then also Mariah Carey's Music Box, and Janet had like her self titled album. And that was this big, like huge aha moment. And then all of a sudden, floodgates, and you're like Aerosmith and Redman and what is going on? And it just
Yeah.
didn't stop.
Yeah.
For me, the thing that kept perpetuating things was just the fascination with music, but also the wanting to help. And I don't want to like, skip past your arc because we should talk about production and all this cool stuff. But it sounds like you got to a point in your career where you said, indie artists are so rad, and sometimes the music is better than the stuff being peddled by the majors and the other labels. How do we help the little guy? How do we get more of this out there? And that sounds like, championing the underdog and fighting the good fight is what inspires you and motivates you. Is that accurate?
Um, a little bit, a little bit. So I definitely go for the underdog thing. I think like we all do. We have a little. There's something built into. I think generally in humans, right? They
Hmm.
like that. But I don't care essentially if an artist pulls up in a Lamborghini or they ride their bike because they can't afford a car, it's sort of like your producer friend said, about are you a lifer? If they're there for the right reason and they're there trying to do something. So if there was some hyper wealthy hedge fund owner or something who wanted to really make it in music, like, hey, I've had a dream all my life. I'm happy that with my career, but I've always wanted to get my music out there in a bigger way, and I really believe in it, and I'm just trying to do
Hmm.
it the best way possible. I believe in them just as much as somebody who's trying to pay the rent, as artists, right? And so on. Now, what happens is, just by deduction, you end up with a bunch of mostly poor indie artists, because
Hmm.
if you're an indie artist and you're trying to be a lifer, you're not going to be spending your time making money, as much money as a hedge fund, owner. So naturally, that would come with the territory. But ultimately, I'm trying to support people's dream, their soul, through music, through the art, because I love music. And so I don't really attach. One thing I loved about working in the studio is that musicians never really seem to even register or care about, kind of where you came from, male, female, in between, whatever it was, your race, what, all of this stuff is just like, we're all speaking one language. We're all like
Yeah.
one sort of community, And I just absolutely loved that in the studio life. And I always really, really took to that part of it. So I guess that's really what I'm trying to say, is that I'm always looking for the aperture in someone's soul that's trying to have light come into it, right? Which is acknowledgement of what they can do with their music. And so that's what I support. And so those are the people I try to attract. I want to work with people who really want the dream,
Hmm.
and it doesn't mean make a bunch of money, doesn't necessarily mean super famous or whatever, which is, I don't care. That's great. That's what you want. Go for it. Whatever your motives are. But as long as there's that aspect of like, I just want my music to like get heard, because the sad fact is 99.9, I'm making this up, but I'm sure it's right around there somewhere.
Yeah.
99.99% of all the music that's out there is never going to see the light of day. It's going to be with your friends, your family. It's sitting up on SoundCloud or like over on Spotify, and it's just like, it's this impossibility for so many people. And so that's why I set up Sync Songwriter, was to give them a path, a real path, not like if you kind of do this or kind of do that. It's like, no, I'm not just going to teach you how to do it or show you how. I'm actually going to connect you directly with the people who are at the top, who make all the decisions. And I can't work with everybody, but if we get together and we work together, and I only do this once a year, then I'll show you how to do it, and then I'm going to introduce you. And it's up to you after that. I
Yeah.
can't make it happen for you, but I can put you into these circumstances that you would never, ever be in otherwise, kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And ultimately, it sounds like the thing that you're looking for above all else is just that passion, that burning passion to succeed in music, and someone who's creating it from a place of, I don't want to say authenticity, because I do think that authenticity is kind of like where all art stems from, but that reason for living, the ikigai, that's what you're looking for in these artists. Is that right?
Yeah, I love your question. I've never really thought about it deeper than what I just said. And I was, based on what you were asking me. And I think what it is I want to try to support and listen to and help people who are trying to speak through music, speak the truth, their truth through
Yeah.
music. I think that's what it is. They're trying to speak some truth through their music, and they're trying to communicate it. And I want to be there to help them get their message out there. I want to help them communicate that to people who want to hear it, and some people who need to hear it.
I'm realizing now that I have a lot of P sayings, but put passion on paper is something that I started with friends of mine back in the day. And I didn't realize that when we were saying it and joking around, that was the point, that you have to take your passion, the thing that is you, that you live and breathe, and put it on paper. And the double entendre there is that when you're putting your passion on paper, when you're creating, whether it's words or thoughts to paper, that paper is also the dollars. So when it starts with that pure passion, that has the highest chance of turning from the paper into the money. And I think that that's the type of person you're trying to work with. I don't have this tattoo yet, but it's the without you am sick. That's music, right? So without the you am sick. That's how I feel
Yeah.
without music.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, that's great. I mean, if you think about the money as a scorecard, So I have no adversity to money. I think people should make as much as they are able, if
Mhm.
they're able to do that, as long as they're doing it in, you know, genuine ways and not hurting people and all that. But I view it as a big scorecard, in terms of music, and it's a measure of your one measure of your success. And so I agree with you completely. But the nuance that I would add in there is that what I was saying before, and we already sort of covered this, is don't do it for the money, do it for the passion. It's like uh, a great athlete is obviously they want to win and they want to make the numbers on the scoreboard go up as high and as fast as they can make them go up. But that's not really why they're there, not the great ones. They're there because they love the game.
Yeah.
That's why they're there. And when they love the game and they're lifers and they do all those things, the scorecard, the scoreboard goes up.
Mhm. It it's this beautiful symbiotic relationship that I think we as humans lose sight of, where the destination is the journey and vice versa, right? Like you have to envision where you want to go, but the success and where you envision yourself going is simply a byproduct of the work you put in now. And they exist simultaneously and they are separate, but they're also the same, and you can't not do one or the other. I mean, you can do all the things in the world and not succeed the way you think, but you're going to succeed the way that you allow yourself to succeed based on the work you do.
Yeah, yeah. There's an old saying I came up with that from myself. It was, fate is an average of direction, which just means that you have a dream. None of us end up where we thought we would end up. Like even if we're aiming at something, right? We don't end up. Sometimes we fall short. Sometimes we surpass it. Most often we end up kind of beside it somewhere, where it's sort of where we were aiming, but hey, you know what? This door opened over here and it was like, that looked really interesting. So we did that. And then that mixed with our original goal and changed our trajectory a little bit. And then, another thing happened. And all of a sudden, it's like a lightning bolt trying to get to the ground, right? Well, I'm looking down, I can see the ground. I can just go straight there, but I got to take the most efficient path, which turns out it's not straight for lightning. It's got to it's got to negotiate the atmosphere. So it kind of, and it gets there, but not all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it sends these little tracers out apparently and doesn't quite get there. I think life's a lot like that, and in music, when you're sort of thinking about your goals in your music, as long as you love what you're doing, life is pretty short. And I like what you said about your destination, which we'll use the destination example, and what you're doing to get there. All of those things, combine to essentially, for me, just keeps coming back to enjoy the game,
Mhm.
and then things will turn out in some positive way in a general direction of where you're heading.
100%. I want to come back to you and go back into the history and talk about how you went from fencing into rock and roll band. Uh, but another, yes, another P. When I'm doing coaching and people are asking about like the podium and how do I get there and the perseverance, I simply say that it's just pursuit of passion. When you are pursuing your passion, perseverance or that podium placement, it just happens so naturally, and it's going to differ for everyone. Not everyone can be the world champion, but like to win and succeed just comes from constantly getting up and pursuing that passion every single day. Speaking of which, how did you become a world-class fencing champion, but then drop that to be a rock star?
Yeah, a little bit weird, I guess. So we had a rule in our family that wherever we moved to, you had to have a sport and you had to play an instrument. So you could pick whichever instrument you wanted to within reason. I don't think they wanted, I never got a drum kit because they probably were like, accept the drum kit, just trying to not bash everyone out of the house kind of thing. And so I picked up classical guitar and then sport, I was in hockey. I was Canadian, right? So
Mhm.
hockey for like 9 years, mandatory almost. And then we moved to Edmonton and I had to pick a sport. And I just walked in, checked out a few things at this community center and I looked at the diving and the swimming and everything at the track and then saw the fencing and I was like, wow, that looks really cool. And so I was also at the right place at the right time. There was a very, very talented coach who had come over from Russia where the type of fencing this was saber. There was a weapon. It's very strong
Mhm.
in Russia. And so Edmonton was lucky to kind of get him. And so I joined at the ripe age of 16, which was considered a little late, to achieve anything, big. You should start, 12 would be good kind of thing. And but worked up my way and won 2 junior Canadian championships. And, my whole idea of how to advance, something that occurred to me after time, was I viewed winning as a motion, where you're moving towards winning. It's not a thing. It's a motion.
Mhm.
And the motion just means that as you're moving towards winning with no set deadline, and it doesn't even have to be that competition, because you're going to lose, you're going to fail, if things go wrong. All those little things are a part of the winning,
Mhm.
if that makes any sense. So it's like everything is kind of encapsulated in this motion, and you're moving forward, and you sort of end up just like a wind blowing through trees. You end up getting to the other side.
Yeah.
And so that has always been something in my mind. So I never paid attention too much to those, what used to be crushing defeats, be like, well, you know what? I'm better than I was yesterday.
Mhm.
And the next time I'm better than I was the day before. And eventually you start to actually win, but it's just motion, a movement. So I guess that was the going from fencing, to get back to your question, to why music. Well, I got out of fencing at like 22. I'd been on the Olympic alternate team the year before. There was no Olympics that year. And then to get on the Olympic team when there was that year that was going to be on the team, perhaps, whatever, my coach quit and I had to move to a different place. And my parents were putting a lot of money into the fencing because I'd have to fly to different places and stuff. And to qualify for the team that year, I had to go to Europe a bunch of times and do that. And I thought, I'm not going to keep doing that. I'm not a lifer, I'm not going to keep doing this.
Mhm.
So I just decided to cut it short, save them the money. I knew I wasn't going to do it more than a year anyway. I just didn't want to only do it, hope to get on the team and say I went to the Olympics or something, because World Cups were even harder and I'd done plenty of those. So quit fencing and then didn't know what I wanted to do and sort of drifted. I essentially failed out high school and just hated high school. Was an honor student in grade 7, grade 8, but high school was a disaster. Had a great social life, but then didn't know what I wanted to do. And I went to college briefly, like went to Carleton U for just a little bit, and realized this is not for me, and I was sitting in an apartment one day with a girlfriend at the time, and I was talking to her about this problem. And she said, well, why don't you be a musician? Because you sit around and every chance you get, you're always playing your guitar and you're writing songs. And I was like, well, I don't know. Like I never saw myself as a musician. And had some excuse, can't remember what it was. And she said, you know what? And she took my guitar, put it into my case. And she said, we're going to an open stage. You're going to get up there and sing. I was like, no, I'm not. And I'm not doing that. That's crazy. And she walked out the door with my guitar.
Wow.
And I was like, I'd follow her. So went down to, it was Carleton, went into the community center there. And she put my name in. I sat there like a little chihuahua with my heart, pop, 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 and got up in front of this, it's a pretty small crowd probably. Seemed like a ton of people to me, but I'm sure it wasn't packed. And got up there and played my 3 songs I could play, by heart or whatever. And people genuinely liked it. It wasn't a polite clap. It was like a, whoa, this is great. And I was just instantly hooked. And it wasn't because of some adulation or anything. It was, wow, I communicated.
Mm.
Like, the reason I want to help musicians, it was the same thing. It was like, they really got that. I did something they can't do. Or like in terms of my songwriting, my specific songwriting. And it was like a symbiosis. It was like a perfect little spherical, beautiful pattern, of me giving and them taking. And it just was beautiful. And so that's how I got into music. And then,
That's so cool. I appreciate you sharing that. I say this often, how in life change opportunity happens by force or choice, and 90+% of the time it's by force. So, kudos to that girlfriend for pushing you, for her being this vessel that was the universe saying like, "Nope, this is happening and you gotta accept it." That's amazing.
Thanks. Thanks, Janine.
Yeah, shout out. Think of all the artists that by proxy she's now helped with you having done everything that you have since, right?
Yeah,
Is
exactly.
there a lesson from sports or your time in fencing that you carry with you that's also super applicable in the music world for artists or even just navigating this crazy music industry?
I gave away my best one with the winning is motion,
Yeah.
the motion towards winning. I think that is probably been my guiding light. If there's another one, I would say be crafty. And what I mean by that, it doesn't mean be more intelligent than you think you are or something. It doesn't mean be tricky. It doesn't mean be deceptive. Well, deceptive. I mean, we all bend the rules a little bit, right? Nobody drives the exact speed limit. We pay the least amount of taxes we could
Yeah.
pay, right? Oh, well, that's a receipt. I'm sure that's fine, whatever. So at that level, it is what it is. That's very human. Um, but I would say be crafty in terms of like zig while other people are zagging. Um, and look for small temporal opportunities, meaning things that just, those times where you feel like, whoa, that just worked out for me. Like, or this, how am I meeting this person? Or how did this coincidence just happen? Right. So there could be some grand pattern to all of that. But at the very least, what it is, it's you picking up on the opportunities. You're seeing it when you normally wouldn't have seen it. You're actually picking up on it because you're focused
Mhm.
on that. So that's a part of being crafty is in my view. It's like kind of a fox, It's like they're always looking around. They say sly as a fox, but they're always looking for an
Mhm.
opportunity, right? That's how they get by. And so I would say that try to find these little fissures in reality and don't do what everyone's doing. Don't just go where everyone's going. Ask that question if it feels a little like out there, like, oh, I don't know if I should even ask this person this question. Hey, tell a long shot. I know I've been drinking at your bar for about a month off and on. I'm staying in an Airbnb down the street. And listen, I love the music you bring in here, and I would love to come and like open for like anybody, honestly. And you give me a pint, and I'll do it.
Mhm.
Whatever. The guy's like, well, it's a pretty big club, and I like you. Yeah, why not? And all of a sudden, there
Yeah.
you are. You're up on the stage, and people are like, you're so lucky. It's like, no, you're not. You weren't lucky. You were kind of being a little crafty. You were trying to think of opportunities and how can I make things happen. So that's all I'm trying to get across is just try to see the little opportunities, the little fissures, the little footholds that others don't see or don't think can lead to anything. And they're all moving at like a kind of like a herd mentality to one place. Don't be a part of the herd. You're going to stand out even if you're kind of doing something a little bit different, zigging while they're zagging kind of thing. So that's, I guess, the other
I
one.
absolutely love that. I mean, I talk about that with coaching, with mindset, is that going with the flow doesn't mean doing what everyone else does. It means going with your flow in your like alignment with the universe, not what everyone else is doing consistently. And I taught myself that through reading and different books that for me, uh, the impulse that's God, if you believe in God or the universe, like that gut feeling is the universe saying, here's an idea. And so if I'm walking my dog and I walk past a bag of poo or someone else's dog excrement that they've left out, and I see it, my subconscious is immediately like, you should pick that up. And most of us are like, that's not my problem. I'm going to walk by it. But I've trained myself to now be the pick it up guy. And the amount of times this has happened, not with dog poo, but with many things where I've like done that and it took me like on a different path. And then I met this person. I was like, oh my God, I would have never had that incredible conversation with that guy who I'm now having dinner with in 2 weeks if I didn't stop because of that feeling, that impulse to pick up this this dog poo. So I think you're right. Like if you feel something in those moments that can help your career to zig or zag, that is the universe giving you a green light, and you need to follow that and create opportunity for you, because success is, what do they say? It's hard work over and over again, but it's also luck and timing, and you have to create those things.
Yeah. 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 I mean, you can, some of it is chance, but a lot of it, I believe is creative. And the thing is, you're not going to notice your
Mm.
failures when they're small, right? These are small little things that you might do, you know? I remember, you know, in high school, becoming friends with this girl who's, you know, very attractive and pretty popular and stuff. And she had a boyfriend for a while, and then she didn't for a while. And I was talking to her about it, and she says, you know, not a lot of guys ask me out. They're too intimidated,
Yeah.
you know? And it's like, yeah. So it's funny if, you know, if you just get over that and you ask her out, just, and if she shoots you down, just feel like you can deal with it, you know, then you know, and you just do that in life in general with things, and just be like, you know, don't be crazy, but just, yeah, just be
Go
crafty.
for it. So I don't want to gloss over your incredible career pre-sync. There's so much stuff, because you went from like that fencing to this guy who did that performance to a band that was successful, and I believe you toured the country of Canada a few times. Um, and then you got into production, like you built your own studio, you became a producer. There's Junos to your name. There's all these artists like royalty of Canadian rock and other artists that you've helped and performed with and recorded. And that led to Sync, you know, which is why we're here talking today and what I want to dive into. So rather than skipping over that, what I would love to try is like, of that time in your life, is there something that you're most proud of or that is the most important that led you to Sync Songwriter?
Do you mean a moment or something that sort of where that became clear? Is that what you're
Yeah,
referring
like
to?
it's tough to distill all that success and the accolades and the history down to like, you know, a soundbite or a 10-minute conversation. But if we tried and you were like, man, if someone remembered Chris SD from that era, it would be blank. Or that you're most
Before
proud
Sync?
of. Yeah, before Sync. Or that just that you're most proud of.
Um, I had moments of pride, you know, walking home after a party with a Juno in my hand in the middle of the night, had a few, you know, beers and a couple glasses of wine and feeling pretty great. But who wouldn't? And we've all been there
Mhm.
in different facets, right? Doesn't matter what that was. It could
Yeah.
be a new car you bought or whatever, right? We all have that moment or whatever. But the thing that really the thing I remember most, I guess, or if I was, you know, an old man staring into the fire, remembering that period in my life, and the thing I would get the most joy out of, the memory I would get the most joy of, would be the sense of community and family in the studio world. And I was alluding to that earlier about, you know, being in a studio, especially with musicians. It's like everyone speaks the same language, and everyone kind of leaves their stuff at the door. I mean, not every band. There's some, you get infighting and stuff, and you get different personalities. But what I mean is that overall, people are on the same mission together, you know, as opposed to just relationships of convenience, you know?
Hmm.
And so that it was like you're serving a higher power, which is music. And I was very lucky in Toronto to fall into such a great community of people, specifically surrounding Blue Rodeo, you know? And it really was this big family, and it was, I just always considered myself so lucky, you know, and all the memories I have that stem from those years come from those bonds and those experiences and those uh yeah those the it felt like the epitome of being human, doing something we love to do, you know? So at the time, I felt like things couldn't really be better, honestly, for at least my wiring, you know? And so that I would say is that. So beyond the pride that is fleeting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we feel great when we achieve something. And of course, it's like, well, what's next, right? So, but the enduring feeling would be that sense of family that I had amongst musicians, you
Yeah.
know, doing that.
I mean, the answer is so telling. You're very much a lifer yourself, and it's something that I caution all artists and creatives to do. Is it's so important to work with people, but it can also be scary because you have no idea who's authentic or not, who wants like to take advantage, has an ulterior motive. So ask those questions and listen to the responses. When someone starts by saying the community or the collective or learning or humbling or whatever it is, those are great green flags. When people immediately start to say cut percentage profit, whatever it is, that's not good. That doesn't mean those things are bad per se, but it's the motivation behind the people that I think is so important. And I really want to focus on sync because I think it's such literally it's one of the three P's. It's one huge vertical. There's so much happening in this. There's a lot of most musicians don't even know that this is an option or how to go about it. I want you to kind of dumb it down and give me the elevator pitch right now of like sync placement. I'm an artist. I'm coming to you. I got a decent catalog. There's definitely some bangers in there. I know now that I need sync. I'm coming to Chris SD. What do I say? What do I ask? And then what do I expect to hear back?
Yeah, I mean, great question. The essence of it is very simple. And it's literally, no one likes to hear this, but it's literally who you know. It's who can hear your music. It's relationships. And it doesn't mean nepotism. It doesn't mean being schmoozy. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means literally being in the right place at the right time with the right person. And that's really the essence of it. So yes, I have a course and I teach people how to do all of that stuff, the preamble correctly, right? You got to have the right production. There's a few things you need to avoid doing in terms of your songwriting and your recording and all of that. You should write as an artist, don't try to write for sync, write, don't look at something and say, wow, that's a great show. I want to be in that show. So I'm going to write something for that show. There are people who do that successfully, for sure. There are way more people who are more successful at writing what they love to write, which makes them good at it, not competing against people who, do the other thing every day, right? So you do your thing, you be in your wheelhouse, your genius zone, you do what you know best, and then you basically look for the targets for your music, right? That's key. Now, none of any of that matters. None of it matters if you can't get someone to hear your song. So that is really the key, right? You've got to be able to get your music heard by the people who can make something happen. And that's, in the end, it all just boils down to that. So I said a lot, but but what I'm really saying is just that little kernel of truth about figure out how you're going to be able to get your music heard by the people who can do something for you.
In the world of sync, is it mostly people like yourself that handle it? Are there web platforms that people could submit to successfully and then be considered? Because as you and I know, there's an insurmountable amount of music that is being uploaded. Not even AI, just like actual user generated content is something ridiculous, like 100,000 songs a week or a day at this point. To go through, if I'm running a movie set or a TV show, to go through that much music and find the thing that fits for that one scene, and there's only going to be like 20 in the movie or 12, you can't comb through a million songs. So I totally understand that you need suggestions and pitches and all this stuff. How successful can someone be at sync? It seems like the opportunities are so small.
They in the wild, they're extremely small. They're infinitesimal. I mean, your chances, you're playing a lottery just sitting out there. If you're cold emailing supervisors or you're sitting in a library or an agent, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. If you're following if you're doing what everyone else is doing and everyone's putting their music in all the same places or going to certain platforms because it's a really low bar to, I have to upload my music and somebody might hear it. Everybody's doing that. So, your odds are extremely, extremely low of getting a placement. So early on, I saw that and I realized what was going on. So when I was in the studio working with artists, trying to figure out indie artists, one of my problems was I would work at the label, big label artists, and they had all the money, right? So the label be paying for everything and everything was great, and I got paid well, and and it was easy and it was fun and whatever. Indie artists would come in. I would love their music, right? Well, they don't have a huge budget, so I'd be cutting them a deal, and which I wanted to do. And we would work blood, sweat, and tears on the music. And then the record would go out, and they didn't have even a manager or anything. And sometimes they just couldn't, they'd go to a distributor. The record would just go nowhere,
Yeah.
and it happened so often. And I was like, how can we get around this, And that was right around the time where sync licensing was becoming a thing, was becoming this oh, it wasn't selling out anymore. You could actually get your music out there, and cool people were doing it because there was many, many more shows and things that were coming up, right? Netflix was getting established, and there were just so many more avenues, right, online and things that you could be in. You didn't have to be in
Mhm.
whatever the modern version was of the Love Boat at the time or something. You're like, I cannot have my music in there, and so you could be on cool shows, and so it became great, and you got paid a lot of money, right? You make thousands of dollars often, right, for these things. So I
Mhm.
realized it was such a path for making money was great. But my main thing, hearkening back to what I was talking about before, it was really about communicating your music in a huge way. Because if you think about when you get into a show or a movie that's like a big network show, you've got millions of people watching, 4 million viewership, right? And even if a fraction of them are Shazamming you, it's like you get this massive boost. I've seen it so many times in Sync Songwriter. People get a big placement in got a member who got a big song in Paint Hustlers, a movie that did okay, had a lot of big actors in it. Um, they're like Spotify went off the charts. They got invited to festivals. They were having labels courting them. It was just one placement. And
Yeah.
so that is just such an amazing part of being able to communicate your music and get it out there. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's sort of how I came to sort of do that. And for people that want to have success in that, if you're doing what everybody else is doing, you're going to just end up in this lifeboat in the ocean, waiting to be discovered. Right? Hope doesn't work. Got to be proactive. So I started Sync Songwriter, took the hardest road possible, right? The very hardest road was like getting relationships with these unicorns, right? The music supervisors. And I already had a few in Toronto, and I was sort of working my way up and then moved to Los Angeles. And then I spent years like building that network of going to everything I was invited to, talking to them and hanging out with them and not for my music, but just for other people that I was working with, and gradually grew and grew and grew this big network. And now I've got all these supervisors that I can pick the phone up and talk to that, major labels have trouble getting a hold of sometimes. And I get to take indie artists and introduce them directly to them, bypassing all of the middlemen, all the people are trying to
Yeah.
take a chunk of the money and being the gatekeepers, and they go straight. I'm not even a middleman. I'd like, here's my friends, I own this club, and you can just go in there and hang out. Good luck, but you're rubbing shoulders with the
Yeah.
right people. And that's literally zigging when other people are zagging. Right.
It's funny that we're coming full circle back to the beginning of the conversation with that fourth P with people, right? It's about having a community or creating a community, having good relations with other good people in certain spots that can help you push that along. Maybe it's not sync, maybe it's shows, and you get to know the bartender who puts you in touch with the owner of that club who says, you know what, I'm not doing this, but here's the guy that books all the shows who happens to book other ones. And if you're a good person and perpetuate those relationships, it'll lead to bigger opportunity. The the reason for sync and the benefits of are massive, and I totally get that. It's it seems like it's such a hard thing to get into though. So, again, I'm playing dumb. You have limited time, within how much you can do in your life, not to mention that you're a father and you got so many other things going on. Let's say 1,000 artists see this and all are like, I'm messaging Chris. I mean, how many can you take on? And if you can't take them on, where do they go? What is the answer to artists looking for sync?
Yeah. So the way it works, is I realized pretty early on what you just said. I can't work. I just don't have the bandwidth to work with everybody. And so what I do is I only once a year, it's actually in January. So I can't work with you now. Like if you're listening to this and I want to work with Chris, you got to wait till January. So every January I open the Art of the Song pitch, and we have thousands and thousands of people show up for our big event, sign up for the event, right? It's a Sync Songwriter music supervisor panel. People come out to it. So it's like the biggest event that I know of in our space. And so we always have people jump in early, and then we have to cut off at a certain point, right? Because we can't work with everybody. So we take a certain number of people, and then we work with them. It's a 6-month long program. And at the end of it, we introduce you to real supervisors where you're getting on calls face to face with them and playing your music to them. And they're listening to you, talking to you, and listening to your songs. And it's going in their ears and into their brain. And that is like incredible. And it's not just about like a one-off listening session or something. It's about forming relationships, right? Because they're often giving you their email address or their disco link, which is a platform they like to use. And then you start sending them more music, and then you get that ball rolling. And then one thing leads to another. And we have, members of Sync Songwriter who have unbelievable success, sync after sync after sync after sync. I mean, just off the top of my head, just one example, a guy from Italy got so many sync placements that he ended up booking a world tour because he got so well known from people seeing him on a bunch of different shows that were syndicated, and people would Shazam him to get on his list. After like a year or something, he had so many fans, he just booked a world tour and went around the world, the known world, and and it was like crazy. So
that's amazing. So with obviously your program is sought after. There's a certain window and gap to get in January, which is amazing. Help me understand just a little bit more about the industry in general when it comes to sync, like other artists that maybe don't fit for your group or can't get in or miss the cutoff. Like, what are the options? Where else can they go? There aren't like 1,000 Chris SDs out there. Are there apps and platforms?
Yeah, there are. And I'm thinking of the most positive way to say this. What I would do is if I was in someone's shoes and I didn't have an opportunity to meet supervisors face to face, what I would not do is I wouldn't get on into music libraries, because they have huge, often millions of tracks. You're just lost in there. Big agencies have like big rosters and stuff like that. Agents aren't generally going to work with somebody who hasn't got like, music they think that they can pitch and they can sell, which is usually flavor of the month, not always or anything. You've got something behind you in terms of you've got some notoriety, or they really, really, really believe in your music. And that means you can pick up the phone and get them on the phone, which is usually not the case, right? Then you got to sign a contract and you're locked into that. Publishing company, if you're lucky to get one, sometimes they wait for you to go and, do the work, and they collect the check after. It's not always like that. There's some good publishing companies out there, but that's always a danger. All these different avenues that I looked at when I started Sync Songwriter, I saw all of these pitfalls, and all these problems. So if I was somebody who was a lifer and I wanted to get into sync and do it right, I would go all in, and I would move to Los Angeles or like even Toronto, and I would just do what I did and spend the years building up over time, a network of, it's harder as a musician, but if you can, because a lot of musicians hitting them up all the time, but just try to get inroads in there, and it's going to take time. It'll probably take you years to do. So what I do is I shortcut that, right, to months, and but that's the only other thing that I would do personally. So
I mean, I love the response. It's like anything in life. There's no shortcut. There's no fad diet, fad training, fad whatever to get you to those goals. You have to put in the reps. You have to fail a lot. You have to learn. For me, the losses are how you get to the W's. It's a big thing that I share with my kids as well. It's the same thing with coaching and mindset. Like you go through hardships and you have to learn along the way. And even for me, this podcast, right? Like I get this beautiful, lucky thing where after 20 years of being in the industry and running websites and developing relationships with thousands of publicists the world over, do I have enough rapport where, let's call it 5 times out of 10, I can send an email and say, I want to talk to Chris for an hour. And they'll say, sure, we can make that happen. That took me 20 years to have that ability. And then now what I get to do with you is develop our own one-to-one rapport. And then in that real time, in that moment, in that conversation, develop this goodwill and say like, oh yeah, you know what, Chris is a great guy and I love this. And actually I have this artist and I want to talk to him and I want to pick his brain. And sometimes it doesn't go anywhere. Sometimes it goes everywhere, but that's the name of the game. You have to connect the people, man. You hit the nail on the head with the conversation, right? It's the people.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I'm, I'm like I said, I was trying to say it in the most optimistic way possible. And there might even be somebody out there listening to this right now thinking like, oh, Chris is just saying that because he wants, me to go work with him and this is what he does and so on. And you know what? Fair, man. I'm a skeptic myself, right? We all get spam. We all get people like trying to sell us stuff and whatever. I get that. But I'm trying to just tell you the truth. The truth is, and if you don't believe me, go and try for a year. Just try, do all the other things that are available to you and see what happens. You might get lucky, right? There's the odd time somebody's driving in their car without their seatbelt on. They get into a car accident, car flips, they go through the sunroof, hit a pine tree into the snowbank, and the car explodes. And then it said, man, if I was wearing my seatbelt, I'd be dead right now. So don't wear a seatbelt. Well, it happens, okay? So you might get lucky. But I've been in this industry for like, I was going to say way too long. I love what I do, but it's been a long, long time. And there is no free lunch. There's no shortcuts. There's no, the only shortcuts that you can get is through other people,
Yeah.
So you can drive and put miles in on your van and touring. You can be on your computer, going to all these different forums with everybody else. You can be on your social with everybody else doing all the same thing. But if you can get somebody to hear your music and think you're kind of cool, because they're humans too, right? Don't forget, they have limited bandwidth. If you're one of those lucky people who gets in that little stream of bandwidth, they're just looking for good songs, to put in. They're not like these like computers that stay up all night processing information, right? They're just like, I need the right song for this. And you're there and you make their life easy because, oh, well, your song, why would I go and look at 1,000 other songs? I got you right here, and that's how the magic happens. It's just simple as that.
Create value for people, approach things with offerings, not asks. It's funny, like even to this day with social media and everything that's out there and paid ads, for me to take a flyer and go with my kids to a park or to a mall and just hand out flyers and say, hey, my name is Chris. I'm a coach. I talk to rock stars about mindset and mental wellness. Here's my thing. The amount of conversion I get on those over everything else is still significantly higher.
Than going online.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you're appealing to them directly, right? And there's a face to it and there's a human interaction is really what it comes down to. But you're up against, that's a little bit like somebody saying, oh, I should go to these conferences with supervisors or meet them and shake their hand. The problem is you're in a lineup after the panel. And there's 40 people and the supervisor's shaking your hand and they appreciate, they're all, by the way, music supervisors, all the ones that I know, I work with the top ones in the industry, they're super cool people. They're like musicians, right? Some of them are musicians. They support musicians. They're married to musicians. They're going out with music, they're around music. They love live shows. They're like a cool hang. And so that's why they get hired to do music because they love music and the good ones have been, doing it forever. Go back to the lifer thing, which we've been using a lot this talk. So they want to help. They'd rather give you a check, an indie songwriter, than give it to a company. They love that whole story, the underdog and everything, and just like they want to support you. So It's just about getting yourself in front of them. And if you figure out how to do that, then that's the way to go. But if you're at a conference and they're all just sort of sitting there, meeting person after person, putting your download card in their bag, by the time they go to the hotel room, what do you think they're going to do? Dump the bag out and sit down at the computer and go through all that and listen to music? No, they want to go to dinner and they want to hang out with their friends, and they're humans, they're people. So you've got to kind of, be a little craftier about it. You got to figure out a way to kind of get, I'm not saying do what Chris Christopherson did to Johnny Cash. You know that story, right? How
I don't share.
So Chris Christopherson, before he was a songwriter, before he was a performing songwriter, he was just a songwriter, right? He just wrote songs, and he really wanted Johnny Cash to cover one of his songs. And Johnny Cash, like whatever, he couldn't get a hold of him and didn't know who he was. Manager brushed him off, whatever, just couldn't get through to him. And Chris Christopherson had, I don't know if he went to Vietnam or he trained anyway. He trained to be a helicopter pilot around that time. So he was a really good helicopter pilot. He got a helicopter and he landed it in Johnny Cash's yard and got out of the helicopter and said, "I'm been bugging you and I want you to cover this. I want you to listen to the song." And Johnny said something like, "You're lucky I didn't shoot you, for doing this kind of whatever." He did listen to it and he ended up covering it and it became a huge song. So now
that's so cool.
I'm not advising you to do that with music supervisors, even if you could get a helicopter. But all I'm saying is that there's ways of doing it. And that's what I try to do at Sync Songwriter, make it really organic. The supervisors want to be here. They want to be here because they love what we do. They know that we're very careful with who we work with. We don't work with thousands of people. They feel safe with us, and that is awesome. So it's that back to that family community thing, right? When we want good vibes, life's short enough. Let's just live with good vibes. So
100%.
Yeah. And then when you're meeting the supervisors in that environment, that like slays any other kind of interaction that you can possibly imagine, unless you are like family or friends or like, whatever. So that's what we try to do. And that's how we've had so much success. We have so many sync placements because of that, I believe. Right.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think artists need to come across as hungry, not needy or desperate, right? It's like dating. You want to be in it, you're sincere, but you're also happy to walk away. I grew up in and around so many different conferences, and when I was at BlackBerry, I ran, shut down, ran and shut down the BlackBerry equivalent of iTunes, in 17 countries around the world, doing millions of dollars in digital downloads. And when you go to those festivals, you hit the nail on the head. People are human. They're doing as much as they can. Then they want to go and decompress afterwards. And there may be that line, at the booth. But putting yourself in the line is the equivalent of creating that opportunity. And then how you zag when you're in that line, how you present yourself. And maybe your card's not a card. Maybe it's a Nintendo 64 and it's something totally different. And the person can't stop thinking about it. That is what you need to do to create opportunity, not just within sync, but within anything in life, within any industry. So I love that anecdote. And thanks for sharing that story. I feel like that is a huge takeaway for me today. I'm going to go and get a helicopter. That's what you've advised me to do.
Nice. Please send the video.
So yeah, was that please send the video or police send the video? I don't want to keep you any longer. You're a dad. You're doing things for artists as much as possible. I really appreciate your time. I always end with the guest giving one last final word, with you putting a thought in people's pockets to take away. So please wrap us up before we end record.
Well, I would just say, I guess I would end with this. Oh, here, I'll end with this. So my brother and I, we were in a band together. So we were in, the band that we toured around and everything like that. And we, early on, when we first started the band, we didn't know anything about anything, right? Of how to do this. So we decided to go to a conference in Toronto. And we went down and we were just basically, trying to get in, and we were a little bit late. And so we walked in a little bit late. And one of the keynote speakers was the ex-manager of the Sex Pistols. And so he was walking out as we were walking in, and he had his little entourage around him. And we basically kind of walked up to him, and then me being, me just kind of said, oh, I got to get some advice from this guy if I can, kind of blocked his way a little bit. And he looked, and I said, Malcolm, just 1 second, I just got one question for you. So this is my brother. We're like, we're just starting a band. What's the one thing that you think we should do when we're starting out? And he looked at us, and I think he looked over at my brother, and he took the lanyard, they give you for the conferences, and he took it off his neck, and he threw it on the ground. And he said, don't come to them. Make them come to you. Go home and write better songs and let them come to you. And he walked away. And I thought, that's the worst answer I possibly could have gotten for that question. Thinking about it was the best answer I ever could have got to that question. It all really made sense to me later. And it was like, it all comes from the songs. It all comes from the way you deliver them, your performance, all the stuff that, you do in your basement studio or whatever, work on your songs, work on it being a better songwriter and an artist, and just be good. Billie Eilish didn't become Billie Eilish because it was like trendy. She created the trend. She like created it because her songs were amazing. She had a beautiful vocal delivery. Her brother's a fantastic producer. That was like quality stuff. That was like, you couldn't deny it, right? Hearing, going back, hearing like Teen Spirit for the first time, to pick something super generic, right? First time, halfway through, I literally called the radio station, in Ottawa. Like, I'd never done that. Like, who's this band? And what are they doing on your, the radio station that I didn't really like, because it just happened to be on the clock radio or something. And, it just grabbed people. It was just such a great song and everything like that. So I would just say, do all the things that we've been talking about here today, but always remember the seed. The most important part is your songwriting and the way you deliver your music. And you don't have to be the best singer in the world. Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, they're not going to win Vocalist of the Year awards for technical prowess, right? But who cares? It's not what makes them great, right? So do your thing. Do what you do it well, and people will listen. The cream does rise to the top.